Thumbs up. Okay, great. Thanks for taking time in the middle of your mornings, depending on where you're dialing in from. I know that this is probably in the middle of your day. So whether you're rounding or in the middle of seeing patients, maybe you're on a research month, but we'll try to get through this. I'm going to describe for you our process of needs-driven innovation and how we do that at Edwards Lifesciences. And then what I'd like to do is talk about the fellowship itself. I have some frequently asked questions that I put up on a slide. We can use that as a starter. And then from there, you can ask additional questions if you'd like. I'm happy to engage with anyone here and discuss a little bit further if this is the right fit for you. So we can dive in and get started. Just a little bit of a background about me. I'm a cardiologist by background. I did my clinical training in medicine at the Cleveland Clinic and then headed over to Minneapolis for my cardiology fellowship. Got the bug for medical devices around the time that TAVR was FDA approved and all the other things along with TAVR sparked a lot of interest around solving new problems. So I'm not an engineer, I'm just a clinician, but I was able to partner with engineers and learn how to partner with folks outside of my immediate sphere. And so that's what really got me hooked on medical devices. I went out to the Stanford Biodesign program then, where I did my postdoc fellowship training. And my intention was to go on to interventional after that. Got a little bit sidetracked by the biodesign experience and ended up leading the health portfolio at a global design and innovation firm called IDEO, which is based in Palo Alto. And got recruited out of there to then be the chief medical officer of a digital health cardiovascular startup that was backed by the ACC as well as venture capital. And most recently, I was recruited to start this new position at Edwards Lifesciences in January, where I'm running the internal incubator group, which means we develop all new technology from the inside. And then I'm also leading this fellowship program. So really happy to be sharing this information with you this morning and looking forward to a very interesting dialogue. Let's see, I have an annotation request here. So I'm going to approve this and move forward. Okay, well, you know, as clinicians, as surgeons, whoever happens to be tuning in this morning, I think everybody recognizes the tension and the complexity in doing new things. And so for you to change the way that you're going to treat your patients or the options that you present to them, you should have a pretty compelling case for better, safer, more timely, more accessible care. And that trickles over too to the options that you offer your patients who currently have few or none. And oh, that was maybe something that I shouldn't have done. Sorry, folks. Here we go. Let's try this. Okay. So, you know, when we think about innovation, we take a needs-driven perspective and approach. And I think Paul Yock said it best, that a well-characterized need is the DNA of a great invention. And he said this decades ago, but it holds true today. And I think it will hold true moving forward. That this is the most effective way to take on new technology development. So what does this actually mean then? So a common practice is for a company or some entity to think of a cool technology and then look for applications to use that shiny thing. So they end up having to push or impose on conditions that might not even be problematic. But in the case of needs-driven innovation, we invest heavily in identifying real problems and then diligencing the aspects of what composes a truly unmet need, then taking multiple shots on goal and basically creating conceptual pathways that ultimately yield the most appropriate technological solution. So I like to think of the similarities in how we practice medicine and how we create new devices and technology. So in medicine, as everyone here knows, hopefully you do these things. You comprehensively assess your patient, you prioritize your differential diagnoses, you define what your constraints are in treating someone, what will this person tolerate based on the substrate that they are, And then you intervene and you reassess and you adjust based on their response. In design, we comprehensively assess a focus area, we characterize a need and the criteria or the product specifications that will be required to make that thing real. Then we form bounded and generative questions as the launch pad for our brainstorming. And then we invent, we test, we prototype, we iterate. So I think making these connections, recognizing the parallel nature of what you're used to and maybe what you're starting to explore is both interesting as well as critical to the next phases in your life. So how do we achieve all of this then? So we start with clinical immersion, and we observe human-to-human interactions and human-to-technology interactions. We speak to clinicians, to patients, to hospitals, to payers. We take our collective observations, we connect the dots, and we form insights. Then we load up on context and extract the need. So what is the real crux of the problem? What specific patient population is most affected or most unserved? And what measurable outcomes can we target to better serve patients who otherwise have a clear value proposition? And how do we get new ideas? So I love this quote by Isaac Asimov. If you haven't had a chance to read this piece yet, it was published in 2014, but he originally wrote it in an essay in 1959. And he says, what is needed is not only people with a good background in a particular field, but also people capable of making a connection between item 1 and item 2, which might not ordinarily seem connected. And this is really key because not all clinicians are great innovators. Not all engineers are great innovators. It takes a mindset of having that background and then being able to work with others and to pull in information, not only from within medicine, but from your experiences outside of medicine as well, and to connect dots and see if there are opportunities to explore things that others might not have seen or appreciated yet. So we take a lot of pride in forming teams that can most effectively tackle issues with a multidisciplinary approach. Edwards has a long history of bridging partnerships with the clinical community. That started all the way back with Dr. Albert Starr, cardiac surgeon, and Lowell Edwards. And many other companies have taken a similar approach over the decades. But now we're doing this internally in our innovation program and in our fellowship. So rather than working in silos, we bring these skill sets together on focus teams. So we drive the process at high speed, high intensity, but most importantly, with the context to understand how to maximize our chances of translating something to a meaningful technology that solves patient needs. And of course, we work in parallel with our expert colleagues who help us navigate all the realities of bringing something new to the world. And throughout the course of the experience, you learn all of these little tips and tricks and understand the rules of engagement from all these folks who are working around us and with us. And so zooming out then, you see how we break things into roughly 3 phases. And of course, this is on this diagram, it's a linear process, but there's clearly some back and forth that always goes on. But we break it down into identify, invent, and implement. And for our purposes in our incubator program, we operate in 18-month cycles, but we invest most heavily in the first 2 phases before bridging to our colleagues downstream who help us partner and introduce these new developments to the world outside our walls. And so I think as a participant in this fellowship experience, you will get a chance to explore that last phase as well. But you can imagine that iterating and preclinical testing and ultimately clinical testing and navigating all those market realities like creating new reimbursement codes and going through the regulatory clearance or approval process, those things take years. But just to have an understanding of what are the variables that go into that and preparing the team and working with the team to set them up for success is all of what you would be doing throughout this fellowship experience. And so this year, Edwards committed the resources to stand up a first of its kind fellowship opportunity. And so this brings early career cardiovascular physicians and surgeons to the design table for the first time, which is just an unprecedented experience. I wish I had this chance when I was in your shoes. Things ended up being a little bit different for me. So now I have a different type of opportunity here, which is, I think, equally fulfilling and exciting. But so what we're offering now, and we have 2 fellows currently working alongside us, is a 12-month opportunity. It runs from July to June, so lining up with your current medical academic calendar years. And it's a full-time experience that's located at Edwards headquarters in Irvine, California. It's intended to target early career cardiovascular physicians and surgeons. So this can be anyone who has completed their general cardiology fellowship is eligible. Or of course, if you finished any type of advanced fellowship, you're eligible. If you're a surgery resident or a surgical fellow, you're eligible as long as you've completed your residency. And I'm happy to talk more specifically if you have unique circumstances with your training timing. But the key here is that it's a learn by doing experience, and you're working directly on a multidisciplinary team side by side with engineers of different types, material scientists, physiologists, pathophysiologists, the whole spectrum of people who are involved in this process of not only understanding problems and disease states, but knowing how to translate that over into building new things that can one day solve these critically unmet needs. What we do within our incubator program is developing all new technologies. So if you're interested in developing the next best TAVR valve or the next best mitral or tricuspid therapy, that is not the intent of this program. We're actually exploring all new opportunity spaces that have yet to be addressed by our existing commercial business units. So we operate in the non-commercial business unit of advanced technology. So we're not in the business of selling anything. Really what we're doing is understanding, developing, studying, inventing new technologies that will one day be available on a commercial basis. But the current intent is much further upstream. And after the experience, after the fellowship experience, the goal is to then return to clinical practice with innovation expertise that you would not have otherwise captured in your clinical training. And ultimately, you champion emerging new technologies in your field, whether it's, it can be anything. It could be electrophysiology, it could be interventional, it could be structural, it could be imaging, it could be heart failure, it could be cardiovascular or cardiothoracic surgery. But the point here is that you learn the fundamentals and you learn how to apply it, but you also do it. It is a learn by doing experience. So, you know, sometimes we think about fellowship experiences. If they're a non-clinical fellowship experience, it's more of a research and learning thing. But this is actually a working role as well. I'd like to at least share with you the email contact at the bottom here. If you have specific questions or if you'd like to learn more, we have a website that will be going live, I believe, next week, and applications should be opening up later this month. The due date for applications will be January 15th. And so if you feel like this program is potentially an appropriate fit for you, reach out to us and start to get some things in motion. Basic components of what an application has always meant to you: letters of recommendation, and we'll post the actual application and the contents required shortly. I put together a list of frequently asked questions that I've received over the past year and a half related to this opportunity. I'm happy to go through these, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that you all might have on the fly. So why don't I go ahead and just fire through these questions, and then if they're relevant to you, great. If not, then I'll open it up as I approach the end of this list. But so first off, what type of clinician would benefit most from this experience? So getting back to the original slide, this is people who are early career, who have finished their at least their general cardiology fellowship. If they're cardiologists, if they're a cardiac surgeon, they should have completed their surgical residency. And again, that side of training is a little bit different than the medical and interventional and EP and imaging and cardiology side of things. So that probably deserves a separate customized conversation. But if anybody would like to speak specifically about that with me, I'm happy to do so. Is this only for interventional or structural cardiologists? When you think of Edwards, you might think of valves and critical care and transcatheter technologies. The point here, again, is that we're exploring all new spaces. So there is not a requirement that you're an interventionalist. You can have, again, just finished your general cardiology. As a general cardiologist, you have the knowledge to guide teams through the clinical understanding of what patients experience in all of these cases across specialties. So that's what's most important here. The further along you are in training, that we're not going to count that against you. So don't worry about that. But if you're an electrophysiologist, great, you're a great candidate. If you're a heart failure fellow, great, you're a great candidate. I think that the clinical perspective and experience that you're going to bring, just having spent nights in the hospital, managing tough cases, managing a breadth of disease states, that's what's important here, because you have essentially not only a working role, but a teaching role. Everybody's teaching each other. Engineers are teaching clinicians. Clinicians are teaching engineers. Business folks are teaching everybody as well. So there's a mutual respect, a flat hierarchy, and an understanding that everyone sitting at the table is the best at what they do, and will represent their skill set and their craft to the best of their abilities. But they're also resourceful, and they're able to pull in people who can fill in the gaps for them. Can I do this between my general cardiology fellowship and an advanced fellowship? So let's say you're planning to do an imaging fellowship after your general cardiology fellowship. Can this be a gap year? Yes. I think that actually makes quite a lot of sense in a lot of cases. What is the clinician's role on the team? How do I work with others? So the clinician's role is equal to all other members of the team. So team dynamics are incredibly important on small innovation teams, and inserting a hierarchical structure can create imbalanced participation in the whole process. So the goal here is that everyone's decision-making capabilities are the same. Everyone's expertise is different, but equally weighted. And so like I said before, the purpose of this is for you to teach each other and fill in the gaps, and do this at a fast pace, much faster than you would be able to do in any other type of commercial environment, having the luxury of doing this in an innovation-specific experimental group. Can I do this remotely? This is a hot topic, I think, in starting this past year. Currently, the program is based in Irvine, and that will be the case for the foreseeable future. There are clearly times when remote participation makes more sense. but there are also necessary times where tangible experimentation, building, prototyping, testing, all of those things are necessary and required. So this is something that if you are selected to be a fellow, we do have you move to Irvine. We take care of that process for you, and that's for a separate discussion. But we have a relocation plan that allows you to move, plug in to a very well accommodated living environment. You don't have to look for some place to stay. Everything is taken care of, and then at the end of your time, there's relocation back. Can it be part-time? Unfortunately not. Getting back to the equality of the team and the flat hierarchy of the team, everybody pulls their own weight. So this is a full-time experience. And perhaps, years from now, there will be some other offering, but currently this is a full-time deal. What do I do about my clinical practice? So this is a common one. So particularly people who are involved in procedure-based specialties. So if they're interventional EP, anybody who's doing invasive procedures, let's say, they're concerned that, oh, am I going to lose my skill set, or am I going to, what do I do about maintaining my credentials? And because this operates from July to June, your numbers don't get affected, because usually your numbers are either on a 1 to 2 year basis. They're counted on a 1 to 2 year basis, depending on where you are. But it goes from January to December. So we have not yet seen any actual problems with this, even with interventional and structural fellows. Because you're not practicing clinically during this fellowship experience has not limited your ability to maintain your clinical eligibility. Are non-US applicants eligible? Yes. So for the time being, we have reopened outside of US applications. And we're crossing our fingers that visa-related issues don't remain issues. But we encourage you to start the conversation with us if you are outside of the U.S. and you are interested. Let's see, there are some circumstances that have been tougher than others. Last year, unfortunately, because of the processing slowdown from both a political standpoint as well as the pandemic-related standpoint, really put a block on that process for our outside of U.S. applicants. So apologies for last year, but we're optimistic at least that we can open up this conversation again to our colleagues outside of the U.S. What about compensation? So this is called a fellowship, but we don't think of our compensation as fellowship equivalent. So you're probably used to something in your residency and your fellowship training that is just enough to put food on your table. Luckily, this compensation is more equivalent to an early career academic cardiologist salary as a baseline. So that's the salary starts at the assistant professor level, clinical professor level. And then there are additional features that come along with the compensation package that you're probably, as a clinician or as a clinical trainee, not used to. These were things that were new to me as well. And so again, if the program seems like it's an appropriate program for you, we're happy to dive in and answer more specific questions about that. But I think it will be very favorable for those who are interested. Again, I've opened up the email there for you to reach out if you'd like. And I'm going to now stop sharing the PowerPoint and go, or actually, let me see.
It looks like we've received a handful of questions in the chat box as well.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. All right. And if you all would like to come on video too, if you have questions, I'd be happy to take questions live. Should I go to the chat first, Mary? Let's see.
Yeah, let's do that. I can read them off to you if you'd like.
Okay, I can do that. Let's see. Okay, will I retain IP for the ideas and technology that arise from this experience, or would they belong to Edwards? And this is from Christina. And so while you're an employee at Edwards, and this is the same if you're an employee anywhere, the intellectual property rights belong to the company. Of course, you are listed as an inventor. And there are incentives while you're here when you submit an invention disclosure. It starts off as an invention disclosure internally, and then there's a decision: should we file for a provisional patent? If so, great, check. There's an incentive for, of course, you're listed as an inventor, but there's also a financial incentive. If that gets escalated to a utility patent, there's an additional incentive. If that gets escalated to a commercially successful product down the line, there's an additional incentive. So this is probably similar to many structures that arise within the academic world. I experienced it myself as a cardiology fellow, trying to understand how does intellectual property work, and what rights do you retain versus what you get in return. And so always happy to chat more about that as well. So Carl is asking, any opportunities for pediatric cardiologists and or pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons? Yes. So I think that, while we're not specifically targeting pediatric population, I think the knowledge set that you would bring to the table is incredibly valuable, as would be the case with an adult cardiologist. I think understanding fundamentally anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology is the bigger consideration here, and being resourceful enough to guide the teams along and inform the teams as to what is clinically relevant, important. Just being a all hands on deck player. Rashmi is asking, can I maintain my appointment at my current institution, and could this be done as a sabbatical? Yes, so you can maintain that. You can have that prearranged with your department to take off a year, but during your time at the program, 100% of your workload would be spent with the Edwards team. Ankur, all right. Good to see you there, buddy. As a practicing interventionalist, structuralist, how do you maintain procedural competency if you're out for a year doing the innovation fellowship? So yeah, this is a tricky one for some people, but it's ended up not being a problem. So 1 year out actually doesn't hurt your numbers, assuming you're at an institution where your numbers are medium to high. If you're someplace where where at baseline you're not getting high volume, it could potentially be a problem. But if you're anywhere other than that, this has not been a problem yet. We've discussed this with our colleagues at the ACC as well as at CRF. And I should mention that first of all, I should thank the CRF, the ACC for hosting all of these webinars and online experiences. I'd also like to mention that CRF is hosting the application process, and so if people do have more specific concerns about this, we're happy to take it up the chain, but it hasn't been a problem yet. David Cho, all right. What are the current fellows' plans after graduating this fellowship? Are they resuming their previous jobs, or are they moving into industry in a new role? The current plan for them is to go into full clinical practice, but both of them are interested in having some type of continued involvement, either with Edwards or with industry in some capacity. So I think what happens is when you do this, doors open up that you didn't even realize existed. And so whether it's a matter of you now knowing how to best move your own personal ideas forward most effectively, or forming new relationships with people inside the company or at other companies, I think it positions you in a way of understanding how you can best balance your clinical and industry relation life. So that's still TBD, and we're optimistic and hopeful that they get the positions that they aspire to. Zubin,
I'm gonna unmute
yes.
Rashmi so she can ask a question live, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in front of the line, but I don't know, talking is better than typing.
Yes.
So I'm Rashmi. I'm a cardiologist from the University of Utah, general cardiologist. I'm just curious, why has Edwards chosen to do it this way? Clearly, the company can just straight up hire a cardiologist full time. You know, I'm sure they have money for that. Why did they choose to do it this way?
So the way that we operate in the advanced technology group is a very different way that any commercial business unit operates, even in other companies. And so the structure that we have is based on the innovation principles that we both experienced and taught at the Stanford Biodesign program. So there's this inherent educational aspect to it that we're equipped to administer. We have the process of the academic program in mind, but then we also have the capabilities and the resources of a big corporation to throw at this. So there was this recognition that, okay, we have both of these elements. We should offer a program then where it's a combination of education and work experience that other places aren't able to currently offer. So I hope that answers the question. But it's of course, there are other physicians who are hired into full-time roles in other departments for clinical affairs and medical affairs, in strategy. There are a number of different roles that cardiologists can contribute to within industry. But this is intended to be focused on early career folks who want to be a part of the process, but don't necessarily want to commit their whole lives to industry. They want to know how best to go back out into the clinical world and work most effectively with industry.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Zubin, all right. Thank you for the info. Oh, okay, there you are in person. Go for it. I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, I was just trying to see what the timeline was for matriculation into the program, whether this was, July 2021 or July 2022. Right.
So it's July 2021. Okay. So coming up, and it will be every 12 months we will cycle in and out new folks. Interestingly, as I was describing earlier, the entire process operates in 18-month cycles. Mm-hmm. And so what's going to happen then is the current fellows started at the beginning of that 18-month cycle. They're going to jump off after 12 months, leaving 6 months of concept refinement. And so, but that's when the new fellows will come in. So they're going to catch the tail end of the first phase and then restart from new the second phase. And so it's not completely lined up from the fellows' perspective, but it also gives you a unique perspective where you jump in and you see how things are immediately put into play.
Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity.
All right. Kevin, are there opportunities for continued work at Edwards within innovation as a physician? Are there clinical duties associated with the fellowship, such as seeing clinic patients, inpatient care? So There are not clinical duties associated with the fellowship. This is purely a research and development program. And I can see Sam there is actually tuning in live from Edwards. But there are opportunities to work, at least in some consulting capacity across business units in a very limited engagement. So we don't want it to take away from the team's activities because the focus is full-time engagement on the teams. But are there some nights where maybe the critical care folks would be interested in speaking to you and meeting with you? Sure, that may happen periodically or occasionally. Do the tricuspid and mitral teams want to talk to you as a cardiologist, as a clinician? Maybe. Those are not the focus of this program. Those are kind of nice to haves on the periphery, but we don't want those to interfere with your core activities. If there is a sense that it is interfering, then clearly we would cut back on those types of things. Let me make sure that I'm not skipping anybody here. I think Ali has the next question here, and I see you there in person.
Hi, thanks, Zimpor. Great talk. Appreciate the opportunity. A couple questions. One is, I think somebody else asked that in the chat as well. The deadline for the application is about in January. When would be, because right now I'm one of the interventional cardiologists fellowship. I'm finishing my fellowship at UC Irvine, right next to you. I'm smelling the same fire probably as you were smelling. Yeah. So my question is, because I'm starting to look in the process of looking for a job, and I came across this opportunity. And I was wondering when would the applicants get the answer?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. So the applications are due in January, and we would begin the selection and interview process. Right now, we're aiming for late February, and then we should have answers to people by March.
By March. Perfect. And one more follow-up question. Are there certain skill sets that you're looking for? You obviously mentioned that you want someone who has some clinical training, such as finishing general cardiology. Does knowing a knowledge of programming, having a background in engineering, anything specific that you are looking for?
No. So beyond clinical, there are no expectations that you should have any engineering background whatsoever. Those are all nice to have. You know, we're not going to count it against you, but really what we're looking for is people who can bring their clinical memories and experiences and perspectives to the table, and most importantly, who know how to be resourceful and get clinical information. So as a clinician innovator, it's important that you have the ability to step back and not only express your personal practices and your personal preferences, but express how do your colleagues practice? What is the variability in how people practice? Obviously, what are the societal guidelines and how do people deviate from the guidelines? Are there things that fall outside of guidelines? And so being able to pull on the right resources and shy away from bias as much as you can is most important.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Gary, is there an immigration attorney to deal with visa for Canadian cardiology fellow here on a J1? We have the ability to discuss specific visa issues with anyone who is interested and who thinks that this would be a good opportunity. So I don't know specifically if it's an immigration attorney, but there are people who can speak with you about that. All right, let's see. I'm going down the line here. Is it open for basic wet bench molecular cardiology research with a clinical application? So I can't rule that out. It depends on where the process goes. So like I was describing earlier, before we get to describing what the solutions might be, first we focus on understanding the space, understanding the need, characterizing that need, and over time, and I'm talking nearly half a year that goes by, then we start to dive in and understand what concepts would most effectively take on this challenge. And if those concepts happen to be molecular in nature, then we can talk about, is that an appropriate thing to take on internally? Are there opportunities to partner with outside entities if we don't have certain capabilities? But I think it's all of those things are possible. And in terms of the capabilities that we have in-house, we can pretty much take things from a napkin drawing all the way through to a commercial product with everything that we have in-house, on site in Irvine. Okay, let's see. Akshay, is a background in engineering necessary or preferred? Okay, I think we answered that one. And let's see. Will you allow a fellow to do external shifts in their clinical field, such as weekend coverage, to maintain skills as much as possible? You know, this would be nice in theory. In reality, I think it's tough for you to show up and not be exhausted. I did this myself for years. I moonlighted on the weekends, and I would show up on Monday and I was wiped out. Or I would take off early on Fridays so that I could, you know, get rest pre-call, and then I'd be post-call and just completely wiped out. And so again, as much as I want this to be possible, I don't think that this is currently going to be something that makes sense. And so unfortunately, we can't support maintaining clinical practice. So you just have to ask yourself, is it possible for me? Is this going to fit me personally in my career plan to step away for a year and do this? I've personally, when I've been on a research month, let's say I've been out of the cath lab for a month and I haven't touched a wire or a catheter, and then I walk back in, and of course it's a little bit uncomfortable getting back in at the beginning, but you pick it up pretty quickly. It's not, if anyone on the call here has taken any time off, you know that when you do go back, of course you're scared to get back in. Of course there's some element of fear, but once you start doing it again, it's not that bad. You pick it up pretty quickly, assuming that you knew what you were doing in the first place. All right, am I allowed to pursue my own research direction based on my decade of research data? The goal here is not to bring in outside ideas or technologies, but it is to go through the process from zero to something with the team specifically. So you can, of course, bring your skill sets and your knowledge base to the table, but it shouldn't have an influence on the direction that the team goes. The team as a unit should decide together what makes sense to move forward and why. And so there should be a rationale behind why you as a team have chosen that this space is worth going after. How do conflicts work with the fellowship if you were already involved in other medical device startups? So disclosure, like anything in life, like any presentations or affiliations that you have, you disclose those things, and we discuss how they may impact your involvement. If it's a medical device startup that is working in a competitive space that we might be working on, then that would be problematic. If it's something outside of a space where we would be working, then it's not as problematic if you're working on something completely unrelated to what we could be doing. But I think that would be a discussion that we would have to have separately. So I'm happy to, I think that's all of the chat questions. I'm happy to open up to any other live questions as well and take it from there. So this is great, by the way. Thanks for everyone taking time this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. But I'm really excited to get to share this experience with you all. I know that that the current fellows are up to their eyeballs in in the whole experience. And all right, there's Young. All right, I'm seeing a bunch of my former colleagues and classmates as well. They themselves may not be candidates for this program, but they may also just be looking to spread the word. So that's the key here too. If you yourself are interested, great. We'd love to chat. If you know people who might be interested as well, we'd love to chat. And really, this is just it's because it's a first of its kind fellowship program. We're learning a lot as we go, and we're evolving the process. I myself, in my former innovation fellowship life at Stanford, I was working alongside an orthopedic surgeon, a marketing specialist, an MBA consultant, a material science engineer. I mean, this whole mix of people who I never had a chance to work with before. And so I lived in a hospital just for decades, right? With my crew. It was my fellow residents, my fellow fellows, the nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistant, everybody who make the techs, everybody who makes your medical life work in the outpatient and inpatient setting. But I never had the ability to like look over the wall and see what other people were doing until I was fortunate enough to have a mentor who kind of took me by the hand and said, hey, we have like really incredible engineering capabilities across campus, right? And I said, I did not know that, even though I'm almost done with my clinical training, but better late than never. And that was, again, this was halfway through my cardiology fellowship, getting to meet those people for the first time and open my eyes as to what they're doing and what they're capable of doing was incredible. So I was in Minneapolis, and these people are working on fluid dynamics, studying the Mississippi River. But it just so happened that a couple of these guys were really interested in cardiovascular fluid dynamics modeling. And so we built from scratch a very robust model of aortic arch flow and all the complexity of how flow turns around corners and reverses in certain places, and inserting digitally created devices and then testing different conditions. And it just, as a clinician, getting to play in that space was like being in a candy store. And so now it's just expanded so much further, because now it's okay. Those things are great. Understanding engineering capabilities are great, but what is actually needed? What does society need? What does clinical practice need? And is it going to create a compelling value proposition that will allow this thing to reach patient care? So you can have something that's cool. You can have something that answers a bunch of questions. But if it doesn't provide value to some stakeholder in the process, it won't see the light of day. And so these are the things that you have to learn by doing, and you have to experience it, and you have to get asked these types of questions, and you have to challenge yourself as a clinician, having experienced what you have, and say, I thought I knew how this worked, but actually, I haven't talked to the value committee at the hospital, and I don't really know what they consider when they talk about what they're going to purchase for the hospital. Like, what's important to them? Do they really care about a patient's 6-minute walk test? Do they care about some other outcome? What do they care about? And so these are things that we didn't have visibility to until we started to look and we started to reach out to these types of folks who, again, are incredibly important in the whole process. So I think by taking a step aside for a year, by doing something like this for a year, it's not going to be right for everybody. Not everybody will find that this is the right fit for them. But if you can imagine that having that type of experience would benefit you down the line, and that you do want to work with industry in some way, or later on you want to invent something on your own, but you want to have a way of taking that thing forward more effectively, I think this positions you really well. I can't tell you the number of calls that I get, or texts that I get, or emails that I get on a weekly basis from buddies starting from medical school onward who say, hey, I've got this really great idea. Can you help me think through, like, what do I need to do next? And I just think to myself, if only they had experienced the past, decade worth of things that I've had the privilege of experiencing, they would be better positioned to take these things on themselves as well. And so I hope that everyone on the call, in some capacity, has the ability to experience this or something like it, to learn how to take your ideas forward. Because I can imagine that of everyone who's tuning in right now, the amount of ideas, the amount of problems that you've identified, the amount of needs that are out there today, right now, are infinite. It's a matter of prioritizing them and deciding, what resources do I have to attack these problems in a certain order, because we only have so much time on Earth, right? And you have to pick what you go after. And same thing applies with all the research that you happen to be doing, or all the publications, all the writing that you're doing right now. You have to be able to prioritize these things. So take those lists of problems and ideas that you've been collecting in your pocket for the past several years. Think about those things. Decide, is this something that I would like to understand further, and how to manage this insurmountable list of things that I've noticed as a clinician, as a trainee growing up, and think about the structure that this provides. Before I did the fellowship, I relied on an apprenticeship model, basically, from my mentors, right? And I'm sure that many people on this call can relate to that as well. I had a mentor who was a very successful medical device entrepreneur. He's an interventional cardiologist. He invented the assist device in the cath lab, the automated contrast injection system, and then did many other successful things after that. And so what a privilege to get to work with someone like that, who can teach you the ins and outs of things. But that's a one-on-one relationship, and it's not a structured process. So by going through a program, whether it's a biodesign fellowship at an academic program or an industry program like this one that we're talking about today, I think those give you a perspective and an understanding of how to take things on that you would have otherwise only gotten from an apprenticeship, which I can't take away the value from that. I mean, clearly that's incredibly valuable as well. So let's see, anybody else have any questions? I know that there are a lot of folks chiming in here on the so having a critical care background additional, is that helpful? Of course. I think that the more clinical experience you can bring to the table, the better. But one of the things that I think we all have to recognize too is our own limitations. So again, getting back to the resourcefulness, you may not be a clinical master of all specialties. That's okay. But do you know people who are, or do you know where to get the information that can fill those gaps? That's what's most important. What will be the website link when it's up and running? So we're going to share that with you separately in an email. Everyone who's attending here, I believe Mary and our friends at the ACC are going to be sharing the website link as it goes live here shortly. I believe it should be going live today, tomorrow, or early next week. So stay tuned for that information. And you learn how to make websites too. No.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, thank you so much. This was great. And I also need to give a quick shout out to the healthcare innovation section at ACC. If innovation is something that you're interested in, please, if you're not already a member, join the section. We have a ton of work groups. We just started our innovation forums, which is a bi-monthly forum with different topics connecting members and physicians with industry on various topics. Our next one is in January on artificial intelligence. I, again, will be sending out the website link, a recording to this, and contact information if you have any questions that you weren't able to ask today. With that, do you have any last words?
Yeah, again, thank you so much to the ACC. Thank you, Mary, for hosting this. Really exciting time, I think, for everyone coming out of their training and entering into the real world and thinking about what will that future experience